So you lost 10 years or 11 years of your freedom. That's time that's gone. Yeah. You know, you can't reverse the time in hands, and sorries, I don't think are going to cut it. Did the state compensate you for the time that you lost?
Yeah, you know, that's like one of the main questions people like to ask, and I think people miss the point when it comes to that. It doesn't matter how much, if anything, I was compensated. Again, you just hit the nail on the head. I lost 11 years of my life, but it's just not me. You have to understand, I had 5 small children at the time of my arrest. My youngest daughter was 5 months old. Think about that. My youngest daughter was 5. Yeah, man. And then you think about that, right? You know, 5 months old, and then when I'm out, I'm celebrating her 11th birthday.
Did the Deadline have you do that? Do a clap? Or did they have the little...
Nah, I've had it all, man. I've done so many interviews and talk shows and radio shows, so yeah.
Okay.
I don't mind the camera, brother. The camera don't bother me.
Yeah, I wasn't, when I started this, I was not comfortable in front of the camera, so.
No, not me. None of that stuff bothers me, man. I just figured, you know, I think to be comfortable, you have to be truthful. And as long as you're truthful with things, you ain't got no reason to fear that camera, right?
That's right.
I mean, unless they do what they did, you know, they take bits and pieces of what you talked about and then said, okay, well, this is how this is that. And then that's how you get, like, how I got messed up in my particular situation. Yeah. During what turned to be an interrogation, you know, by me trying to be helpful.
Yeah. All right. So I want to go ahead and welcome Ray Jennings to a brand new episode of You Have a Collect Call From. And his journey is a little bit different, or way different than anybody else that I brought in here before. Everybody that's come on here, they've been guilty of the crimes that they have committed. In Jennings' case, it's totally different. He was, I think this would be a classic case of getting railroaded.
Yes, sir.
And then ultimately getting exonerated. So, hey, thank you for being with us here and sharing some time with me here today, Ray.
Yes,
how are you doing today?
I'm doing good, man. I appreciate your opportunity. I appreciate you being out here, man. Thank you.
Would you mind sharing a little bit of, in a nutshell, like exactly who you are and what happened and how we're here today?
Yeah. So my name is Ray, as he said. In the year 2000 the year 2000, actually, December 13, 2000, my life changed as I know it. I was pulled over and had about 5 sheriff deputy cars behind me and everybody with their guns drawn. And at that time, I was informed that I was being arrested for the murder of Michelle O'Keefe. And this was, this happened in December 13th of 2005. And the incident in which they referred to happened in February of 2000. So that's what led to the beginning of this long journey that I went on.
All right. Thank you for sharing that with us, Ray. And so let me ask you, so normally every time I have somebody come on, I normally ask them, what's their earliest memory as a child? What's your earlier memory that you could share with us?
Wow. The earliest one that, that always stands out is, my mom and my brother and I, we lived in a project neighborhood in Newport News, Virginia. And we were one of non-Black families that actually lived in this community. And it was difficult to live there in that situation. There was still a lot of racism in the country, which, today is still around too. But, as little kids, we didn't understand what was going on because we didn't see that race that people, harped on so much. So it was difficult growing up in that community until we got established. And once we got established as, we're the same as everybody else. We're all in the same position. Ain't nobody better than anybody. Things kind of, eased up and we all became friends and we all grew up together. So that's one of the earliest memories that I have is just pogo sticking, if people know what pogo sticks are.
Yeah.
And riding big wheels, through the neighborhood, with my brother.
Nice. And let me ask you this: did you ever see yourself going to prison? Anytime throughout your life, did you ever see yourself going into prison? Because I know a lot of the people that I've interviewed in the past, that's what they're aspiring to is to go to prison, to make a name for themselves, pretty much go to the major leagues, and that was pretty much like going to college for them.
No, never. It never crossed my mind whatsoever. Prison was the furthest thing from my mind. I don't think my mama ever imagined that I would be in prison or any of my family. So no, it was total shock for everybody.
And how did let me ask you, so after you got, after everything happened, is there some people that actually believe that you did this like from your family?
Nobody from my family or immediate friends believed that I took somebody's life. I've always had the support of everybody, that was on my side and in my family and my immediate friends. Even strangers that caught wind of my case believed in my innocence 100%.
Right now, you mentioned strangers. So, did you receive a lot of letters or people reaching out to you to try to help you or try to get to know you or just were fascinated with your case?
Yeah. So when I was in LA County Jail, I got a lot of fan mail. Once my case caught wind of different media outlets, and people started sending in, your basic supplies that we generally don't get, paper and envelopes and stamps, and people started sending money for your books to get canteen or, just little things. So that's how the fan mail just came in. And then there was a couple of guys that actually stayed on the team throughout this whole ordeal, throughout everything. And they were very instrumental in helping the process for me.
How did people notice that? Like other inmates noticed that you were getting a lot of action in the mail?
Yeah, especially where I was at in Men's Central Jail. I was housed down there in 1750, and they have TVs on the tier. And so when my case made the news, I mean, they always watched the news. We always watched the news in 1750. So most of the time, if I did go to court and something substantial was transpired at court, it would make the news that night. And so everybody knew about my particular case. There was no hiding what you were there for and so forth. So, but yeah, people recognized, when you have an abundance of mail coming in or large manila envelopes that are stuffed with envelopes or paper or whatever the case may be. So yeah, a lot of people took notice of it.
And how was your first experience walking into the LA County jail system? Because that's a beast right there, walking into that place.
Yeah, it was, I don't even think you can describe it. As somebody that would be considered what the regulars in there would call you a square. And that's what I was considered, a square. I don't have any tattoos that, are affiliated with anybody. I didn't associate with any gangs within the prison or outside of county jail. So it was a shock. It was scary. To say that I was not scared, I'd be lying, because you're into an environment that, from what you see on TV, is very violent. And you just try to adjust and understand what's going on. You sit back and you listen, and some people will fill you in with information, and some people will give you the wrong information. So, but yeah, it was a very traumatic experience in the very beginning. Very traumatic.
What is there any point of the processing that sticks out to you in your mind, as far as like when you hit that first tank, that door closes, and then they strip you down, and then they move you from tank to tank to tank to tank, and then they put your nuts to butts, and they scan your lungs for TB. Is there any of that process that sticks out to you in your mind to this day?
Man, what you just described, all of it. I mean, there's no experience like that. Like, even in the military, we never had to go through what they made us go through during the initial process of being booked into Men's Central Jail down in LA. And that is what you just described, especially being housed in high power. So in high power, if I had a nickel for every time I had to expose myself to somebody, I mean, I'd probably be, pretty wealthy as well as everybody else that was housed down there in 1750 or even 3600 before they switched it over. I don't know what it is now, but for those of us that had to go through I considered it to be, humiliation. And that's what it is. They dehumanize you in that respect. The sheriff deputies that run these county jails it's nothing for them. It's nothing. And they look at you as animals, and that's how you're treated, as caged animals, so.
So you just mentioned you were in high power. Can you give us a breakdown of exactly what high power means and how you ended up in high power?
Well, I ended up in high power, to answer the last question, because of my case. My case was a high-profile case. Most high-profile cases will end up in high power, and what they classified as that is because they feel that you are at risk in the general population for people trying to manipulate you or trying to extort you because they feel because you have a high-powered case that you have money and that they'll try to get things from you and stuff like that. So they try to segregate you and they put you in one-man cells, and that way you're not exposed to a dorm living setting in a sense. And everywhere you go, it's controlled, it's monitored. Whereas general population, it's free movement, except when you go to court and other things within side of whether you're at Wayside or Twin Towers or Men's Central Jail in that respect. So, I mean, high power. It was, I mean, in a sense, it was a blessing, to be honest with you. I mean, it was torment to be stuck in the cell like that. But you had on the tier. And most of the time there was 24 to 26 cells. So there was, you got to imagine there's 25 other individuals on that same tier with you. So you're not alone in that respect, but you're just, you're segregated to your own little world. So
you're isolated. Yeah. The isolation. That's brutal right there.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Gives you a lot of time to think.
Yeah. One time, so was your whole time spent in Old County, or did you move around to different to Wayside?
No, I was in Men's Central Jail 4.5 years. Damn. Yeah. Men's Central Jail.
I remember, the few times that I did end up in county, people were always looking forward to going to prison, and I never understood why. But if you're in that type of setting, I'm sure you want to get out of there and move around. So. Your case took 4.5 years. When the day came and you were found guilty, were you surprised when you heard that the jury found you guilty? Because you took it to trial, right?
I did. I took it to trial. I went to trial 3 times. My first 2 trials were hung jury. They were held down in downtown LA at CCB, Criminal Courts Building. And I got 2 hung juries down there. And then somehow or another, the DA knew some people and they pulled some strings to have the case moved back to Lancaster, Palmdale, where this crime had been committed. And so was I surprised? Absolutely, I was surprised. In my last trial, the jury deliberated for almost a month. And it's kind of unheard of for a jury to deliberate that long and then come back with a guilty verdict. Like something was transpiring inside of that room that you and I are not privy to, and I'm sure that they don't want to speak on it. But yeah, was I surprised? Yeah, I was surprised. I mean, that's for lack of a better word. I mean, you just can't imagine sitting there and taking that.
Were any of your family members there when you got found guilty?
No, not any of my immediate family. Yeah. Because this was in California. Most of my immediate family lived out here in North Carolina. So there was a couple of my friends. My wife's aunt and cousin. So I guess at that point, you could say those were my immediate family. Just a couple of my friends and my wife's aunt and my cousin that I consider to be my aunt and my cousin. So they were there during that. But for the most part, the courtroom was flooded with sheriff deputies and court officials, There was no room to sit. It was standing room only. Like people were lined all the way around the walls because this case had a lot of impact within that community. And a lot of people that were standing there that day believed in my innocence. And I was told that when they took me back down to the holding tank after the guilty verdict. And, they each, I don't know, I had a whole bunch of sheriff deputies come to my door and, and said, they hope to see me back here soon. So.
And the reason they went to, they let you know, or they told you that they wanted to see you back soon, was it because they believed in your innocence?
Yeah, they believed in my innocence. I found a lot of favor in a lot of the sheriff deputies. And then I found a lot of hate with some of the sheriff deputies. But yeah, I was treated very well in a sense. And some guys took notice of that, but I never got, hated on for it. It's just people understood that, I'm not this, I'm not that. I'm just Ray. That's it, man. I'm always straightforward people. I always stood on my own ground. And yeah, so a lot of the guys that came down, they always told me, man, we believe you're innocent, man. We don't think you did this. So
do you recall what was going through your mind when the jury read your guilty verdict?
Yeah, my kids. Yeah, that's what was going through my mind. I'd already been away for 4.5 years, and now I'm looking at life in prison, and all I could think about was my kids. Nothing else came to mind except for my kids and my mom. Other than that, that was it, man.
And during that time, were you receiving regular visits from your kids at that time?
Yeah, from my kids, my wife at the time would bring 2 of them down at a time, and then a friend of mine would bring my kids down sometimes also. And at Men's Central Jail, it's all behind glass, so there's no physical contact. So that was a little difficult. And then there was only maybe a 30 to an hour visit, if that. So
for people that are not familiar with your case, how is it that you ended up in that situation?
Well, back in the year, let's start from 1999 when I moved to California.
Okay.
My wife her family's from the San Fernando Valley area, and her mom had moved up to Lancaster, Palmdale, and we decided to move back. We decided to move out there with them. My wife wanted to move back home at that time, and I ended up taking a security guard job. And the security guard job was unarmed. And so they would place me at different locations, mostly at nighttime, just for a presence, a physical presence, And on February 22nd of 2000, I was at the Palmdale Park and Ride off of Avenue S, and I heard what sounded to be gunshots. And I witnessed a car roll backwards and hit a planter. And at that time, I called in to my dispatch that I had, shots fired, and if they, said someone could send the cops out here, sheriffs. And that's what ultimately led to my incarceration. When the sheriff deputies arrived and then the initial detectives arrived, I was interviewed on scene and released. And subsequently, they started doing further investigations. They still couldn't find anything as far as evidence to pinpoint who was guilty of this crime or who may have perpetrated the crime. And about almost 6 years after that event is when they decided to arrest me for that particular crime with no evidence.
I heard in one of the interviews, your past interviews with Dateline, I believe they said some mistakes were made where normally when somebody is a suspect or they believe was involved, that they normally tape up their hands and for evidence. In your case, that's something that they didn't do, right?
No, not initially, not on that night, which would probably had resolved a lot of the speculation as far as my involvement in this case. However, what I did not know until later on, years later, is that so I did end up quitting that job. So this event happened on a Tuesday. I ended up quitting on a Thursday. I turned in my uniforms and all my equipment on Friday. Unbeknownst to me at that time, the detectives that were assigned to this case actually came through and picked that stuff up. So it was bagged up. It was never cleaned. It was never washed. It was never, in a sense, molested. Right? It was bagged up, set to the side. They picked it up, ran all the tests, found out there was no gunpowder residue. There was no splintering down and around the pants leg where there was a round that was discharged into the ground. The clothing and hair fiber that was found on this young lady's persons didn't match anything that belonged to me. The clothing and hair fiber that was in my uniform had nothing to do with her. There was so much trace evidence that pointed to somebody else and not to me, but they still decided years later to proceed forward with the case.
Let me ask you, on one of your interviews, I noticed that you had mentioned that that you could see her I guess her vein or her heart pumping.
Yeah, so I mean that's what I initially thought I saw. I mean I won't go back and retract anything that I've said in the past, but what's interesting about my statement is it was actually made also by one of the ETMs or was it ETS? EMTs that showed up on the scene. She actually made that same statement well after I made mine. And she said that she noticed a faint pulse, and that's why they started performing CPR or whatever they were trying to perform on her. And when I was asked why I'd never performed CPR or try to do anything to help in a situation like that, I mean, for me, she, you know, it was, I don't know, I don't know, I can't answer. It was just a shock to see somebody in that condition. You know, she was shot multiple times, and whether or not I saw a pulse, I don't think I did, you know, as I sit here now, but that's neither here nor there. I said what I said at that time, but yeah, it was a bad situation, you know, and it was traumatic. So.
Yeah, I could imagine. I mean, you came from. Had you ever seen somebody, you know, being shot before or hurt in that fashion?
No, never. I mean, yeah. So it was a traumatic situation, and I think, you know, when you put people in different, you put different people in the same traumatic situation, they're all going to tell you something differently, and they're just going to see it differently. And you know, we all respond and react to these things differently. You know, and how I reacted and responded probably wouldn't have been the way that maybe you responded or somebody else. You know, maybe somebody had training on gunshots and stuff like that, which they made the argument. You know, the military trained me how to doctor up gunshot wounds, but nothing to the face area. Like, how do you bandage up a face? You know, someone that's full of gunshot wounds to the face.
Oh, that's where she was shot. I didn't realize that she was shot in the face.
So she was shot, and I want to say it was 4 or 5 times. One close range in the chest, and the other were all facial shots.
So when the incident occurred, how far were you located from her car?
I was probably a good 100 yards forward. It was quite a distance, and again, these are like little things that detectives try to use against me. You know, I didn't have my glasses on that night, and I usually wear glasses at nighttime when I'm driving, or like if I'm watching a movie or something like that, I'll wear my glasses. But I'm walking around a parking lot. I didn't think I was going to need my glasses that night, and so what I remember when I heard those gunshots is getting back down behind my car and calling in for the shots fired and watching that car roll backwards. And that's about the extent of anything I saw. So everything that transpired happened behind a 15 passenger van. Yeah. And so as that car started rolling back, that's when all the shots rang out. So the shots, everything was done before that car came into full view. And, you know, that's one of the things that they try to use against me by saying that I should have seen the shooter because of their reenactment that they did. They said that I should have seen the shooter. I'm like, well, you didn't reenact it the way that it really was. You can never reenact anything that has happened, you know, in the current state. You can't reenact that. So
she got shot. The car rolled back. You were behind the car, and then you called the cops. So then you didn't see anything. You didn't see the muzzle shot or
no muzzle flashes. Everything transpired before that car came into view behind that 15-passenger van. And about, maybe 5 minutes later, my supervisor rolls up on the scene. And she's an older lady, and she has a patrol car. And she asked me to get into the car with her and go down. And I refused. I said, no, I'm not getting in the car, first of all, but I'm not going down there. I said, do you have a weapon? She says, no. I said, well, we don't need to go down there, period. And she took it upon herself to drive down there herself. When I stayed at the top of the hill and she drove down, and you know, I got ridiculed for that because I allowed an old woman to go down there. I didn't allow her to go down there. She made a command decision to go down there by herself. And that's when she got down there, and guy saw her get out of the car, and then that's when she called me down to the scene, to come down to the scene with her. And as I started walking down, there was a sedan that was leaving. And then there was a carload of people in there, and they simply rolled down the window and asked me what had happened. I said, I don't know. And I think they wanted to know if somebody had got shot or did I see anything? And I was like, no, I don't know. I don't know what happened. I just heard gunshots and that was it. And they left a lot.
So prior to the young lady getting shot, had you seen her park her car or moving in and out or moving from one spot to the other?
No, when I did my initial walkthrough of that lot, the car was parked where it rolled back from. There's been other reports from her friend that dropped her off that night that they had parked underneath a light, and then that Michelle decided to move her car from that spot to another spot that wasn't lit to change her clothes, which to me never made sense, first of all. But the car was never moved from what I could visibly see. That's where it was at when I first saw it, and that's where it rolled back from after the shots fired. So contradicting stories, I could do all type of hypotheticals on what I think, why her friend said what she said, but that's neither here nor there. So,
you know, your case was pretty interesting from what I saw. You know, they had a psychic saying that they knew the name of the shooter. Mm-hmm. They did a polygraph test that they said that you failed. Mm-hmm. The family ended up suing the security company, and that money that they were awarded, they used to pretty much go after you and set that case up for you.
Yeah, so they used Sylvia Brown on the Montel Williams show. And she said that the killer's name or was something similar to Lee, Leon, Leroy, and my middle name is Lee. And then she went on to describe an individual that one could say it was me and so forth. So, but that was pretty amusing at that time. But, and yeah, so the family did end up suing myself, the city of Palmdale, and the security company. The city of Palmdale they settled out of court for an undisclosed amount of money, which I think was in a few million that they got. And yes, they were already very well known within the community. And so I think a lot of that played into, you know, wanting to find somebody to pin the murder on just to close the case.
And when you participated in that civil case, is that something you had to participate in? Did you have a choice in it? Could you have refused to participate in it?
Yeah, so initially you do have to participate in it. And because I wasn't given an attorney, or the attorneys that I was provided by the security company advised my wife and I at the time to file bankruptcy and list the parents and so forth as creditors or debtors or debts that we owe, and that would put a stay to the case. But what they didn't tell me was that they could go back in and request that the case be reopened based upon these circumstances right here, and that's exactly what they did. So my case was closed, and then they filed an order or something like that to have the case reopened, which we went in front of a judge again, a bankruptcy judge, and the judge reopened my bankruptcy case, which allowed them to proceed with the lawsuit towards me. So the wrongful death lawsuit is what they were suing me for $25 million.
So with the lawsuit, were they able to, was that the way they were able to get their foot in the door as far as to prosecute you down the line?
Yeah, I think that's what that's what they were initially trying to get is where they could get there, like you said, a foot in the door. And that's what happened. As soon as the judge reopened it, I had to do some, what was that? I don't even know what they call them, man. But I did go to the attorney's office. We sat down and they asked a whole bunch of questions, and I didn't have an attorney present with me, and that was probably my biggest mistake. And I got into a real big pissing contest with the attorney that was going after me.
I'm not exactly sure who said it, but he said that you were a used car salesman, that you could sell anything to anybody, and they were afraid that you were going to be able to persuade a jury not to convict you.
Yeah.
Did you ever hear that statement?
I've heard numerous of statements, but yes, I've heard that one from Rex Paris as well as many others. And I think for being myself, as far as at that time in my life, I was very young. I was very egotistic, conceited, and just a whole bunch of other pridefulness going on with inside of me, and that really played into effect with trying to get into a contest with this man, and this is his field, this is his world, and I'm just here, man, and I'm trying to defend myself, and I went about it all the wrong ways in so many words. So
yeah. Towards the end of that interview, yeah, they showed like when he got you to that point.
Yeah.
At what point did you realize that they were gonna pursue this case and they were gonna end up charging you? And at any point did you ever think about just running and leaving?
So I think it was maybe 2 years after the case itself, and Detective Longshore, who was the lead detective on this case, he paid me quite a few visits unannounced at my job at times, and I guess he was trying to rattle me or get me to do something that would lead him to say, okay, I got you type thing. And I never thought for a minute that I was going to be arrested. So you asked that question, like, did I never thought it, but I did at one point sit down and talk to my wife, and I said, I think these people believe I killed this girl. And that was probably about 5 months after the event. So, and then, subsequently things were happening years because they couldn't find a suspect. This thing dragged on for almost 6 years before they arrested me. So during that time, they had a lot of leads and a lot of calls, and they never looked at the right information. And so, what was the other question that you just asked?
Well, did you ever think about just leaving?
Oh, no, I never thought about running or leaving or anything else. And it was evident that I didn't. I mean, once this incident happened, I quit that job. I did go to work for Sierra Toyota, which was in Lancaster. And I sold Toyotas up there in that community for over 2 years. And then I left that and I got a better job opportunity down in Valencia at Parkway Supercenter. And I never ran from anything. I conducted my everyday life. I stayed in the community, no matter how much the news media put out there in the Antelope Valley. And I was on the front page numerous occasions before my arrest. But no, I never thought about running or leaving, because what was I running from? I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't kill anybody. So.
And did what kind of negative effect did the suspicion have in your household or in your work life, or just in general?
Well, the work life was quite interesting. Selling cars, you come across the general public all the time, right? And some people recognized me, and others had no idea who I was. And it's not information that I would, just voluntarily be like, hey, I'm Ray. You recognize me from the paper. But I can't say that it affected my work life too much. I was very successful in selling cars in the community, and it affected my home life because there's always reports that are coming out, and it was stressful. I had young children at that time, and I didn't want my kids to be exposed to things that were happening with me and coming back on them, whether they're in school or things like that. So, but as far as with my marriage or anything like that, it didn't affect that. My wife she didn't think for a minute that I took this young lady's life. So.
And also in the interview, the mom of the victim, she made a comment that she would run into you in the store. Do you recollect running into her in passing?
Yeah, because we lived in the Quartz Hill area. There's Lancaster, Quartz Hill, and the Vaughns, that was right there off of Avenue L. We both frequent that store, and yeah, I remember, I didn't physically, go up to her and be like, "Hey, how you doing?" But yeah, I passed her a couple of times, but I mean, I didn't think anything of it. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what she felt. I know anger, of course, but because she thinks I killed her daughter. But as far as myself, I never interacted with them outside of anything that had to do with this case or in the public.
So the case originally took place. It was like early 2000, and then you were eventually arrested with 2004?
2005.
2005.
Yeah. So I had deployed to Iraq in 2004, and I got returned in November of 2005. And a month later, they arrested me for that crime.
All right. So Ray, like you mentioned earlier on, when I asked you, you have never been arrested before. You were never part of the legal system. The cops didn't get any residue off of your fingers. You didn't have a weapon on duty. So how is it that the cops were able to pin this crime on you ultimately?
Well, ultimately, it was probably my own words what led to my demise. If you go back and you listen to some of the interviews that I gave with the detectives, I talk too much. And for anybody that's watching this or listening to it, the first thing that they'll probably say is, well, why are you talking to the cops anyways? Everybody knows you don't talk to the cops. Well, not everybody, because if you've never been involved with the legal system or had any run-ins with the cops on that type of level, your main goal is to try to help somebody. And for me, that's what I thought I was doing. I thought I was helping with the investigation. I gave them information that I saw, things that I heard, and I gave them information that I probably didn't see and things that I probably didn't hear. And they took all that and compiled it. And I believe the attorney, Rex Parrish, the civil attorney that was suing me, he made a PowerPoint presentation and submitted it to the district attorney's office in February of 2005, in which the district attorney office denied the case. They said there's no evidence here to prosecute Mr. Jennings. And somehow or another, in October of 2005, a arrest warrant was issued. And there's some funny business behind that, but that's for another story.
And when they got the search warrant or the arrest warrant signed off on, do you know if there was any other attempts previous to that time where they were trying to get an arrest warrant?
Yeah, as I just described, in February of 2005, they tried to have an arrest warrant issued, but the DA's office in Lancaster denied the case. There was no evidence to prosecute me. And nothing changed from February in October as far as evidence-wise. So how was I ever arrested for the case when there was no evidence? If you go back and you watch, because it's all been recorded, if you go back and watch or even read the minutes from my pretrial, the judge was even skeptical about allowing this trial to move forward. There was nothing presented that said that I killed this young lady. But yet, here I was moving forward instead of somebody doing the right thing,
So doom days come, or the day comes that where they come and they execute that arrest warrant. Mm-hmm. What's going through your mind?
Well, at that point, that morning, I got up, and again, this was December 13th of 2005. I had went out Christmas shopping for my daughter who lives out here in North Carolina at the time. And so I packed up my car, and my youngest son, Gabriel, always, since I had got back home from Iraq, he was like attached to my hip. He wanted to go every place with me. But this particular morning, I told him, no, you go and stay here with mom's and I'll be right back. So I was taking this box to the UPS store to mail back home for my daughter for Christmas. And so as I left the house, I got onto the main road out there, Avenue K in Lancaster. And when I made that right-hand turn, I looked up, and there you have about 5 sheriff deputy cars out there. And as I pulled over, they all got out with their guns drawn and told me to get out of the car, keep my hands in the air, lift your shirt up, turn around, and took me through all the basic stuff. Get on your knees, cross your ankles, and put the handcuffs on me. So, originally I didn't know exactly what was going on. And of course, once they put me in the back of the patrol car, they told me that it was for the murder of Michelle O'Keefe. And I don't remember too much. It was like a blank, man. Like it was, I was shocked. I didn't know, you don't know how to respond to that. Like I'm sitting in the back of a sheriff car being charged with murder. So, I couldn't tell you how I was feeling that day, man. It was complete shock.
And did you ever think, they're making a mistake, though? This is the legal system, innocent to proven guilty. Did you think that at some point they're gonna be like, man, we made a mistake. We gotta let him out, even before he got to the trial?
Yeah, I thought that throughout the whole ordeal. I could have swore that somebody was going to do the right thing, within the legal system. When you look at the legal system, we all have, if you've never been involved in it, you have a confidence in the system. And if you've never been involved in that system, in the legal system itself, you don't know how corrupt it really is until it affects your life. And I don't say that to say that everybody's corrupt, but come on, man. In the world that we live in today, it's wild, man. It really is that people are not willing to do the right thing, who have the position of power to do the right thing. And those judges that allowed my cases to go forward, they're as guilty as anybody, because they knew that this case didn't have a leg to stand on, and yet they still proceeded and allowed this case to continue forward. That they're as guilty as the people that prosecuted me. And it's a shame that the prosecutors and the offices in which they represent are not reprimanded or punished in some form or fashion for doing what they do to people. It is an absolute, it's a crime. They've committed a crime. They took away 11 years of my life because they didn't want to do the right thing. And they suffer no repercussions for that.
That's sad. It sucks. I was talking to my wife, and she was like, well, what took so long to exonerate him? And I was like, it's not as easy as when you get into the system. That's easy. Mm-hmm. The hard part is to reverse all of that, because, people have signed their name saying that he was guilty, or they push forward. Nobody wants to put their name or say that they were wrong.
Yeah.
So that's the hard part, getting somebody to admit that they're wrongs.
Yeah. It's easy to get somebody arrested. It's harder to get you unarrested, And so that was the challenge. And why did it take so long? Man, we can ask God these questions, right? I don't know, how people believe, but there's one thing people never touch on, and it's your faith. How did you make it through this situation? A lot of people ask me that. How did you make it through? Being that you are not a gang member, being that you go into this prison, this violent prison system, and yet you manage to come out of there unscathed in a sense. Man, you put your faith in something. And for me, I put my faith in God. And that's what carried me through. Nothing else in this whole situation carried me through but understanding and believing that, for one, I didn't kill this girl. And two, all I cared that knew about that was God. So why was I going through this situation, right? What was I supposed to be learning? What was he trying to teach me? What were you trying to show me? sometimes in life, we get sat down in a way we don't want to get sat down in. And so for me, that was a way of God sitting me down. And, breaking somebody of pridefulness, of being egotistic, cocky, and, whatever other adjective you can come up with that would describe a young man that was in his prime who thought he was, ultimately the best thing in the world. And so being broke down in that fashion in the prison system, in county jail and then the prison system, you get broke down. And then you get broke down and broke down and broke down, because at every turn for me, it was a no. Every door got shut. All my appeals were exhausted in the court systems. So that was it, man. So once your appeals are exhausted, unless you can find a loophole someplace, that's it, 40 years to life. But I never succumbed to that mentality. I would never walk around and tell people I got 40 years to life. Never. I never said that, man. Because I didn't believe that in my heart. I knew that at some point, I didn't know when, but I knew at some point that I would be released. Somebody's gonna figure this out. The truth will come out. And it took, right at 11 years. But I mean, it happened.
And you mentioned right now all your appeals were exhausted. So how was it that you were eventually able to get back into court?
Well, to get back into court was a tricky situation. Before we talk about that, I'll tell you that I don't know if people are familiar with the Innocence Project. So the Innocence Project is a nonprofit organization that was developed back in 1988 by a couple of attorneys that wanted to help people that were wrongfully convicted. And so over the years, it kind of spread out abroad. So each state had their own Innocence Project. And of course, California had an Innocence Project in which I reached out to, and I filled out. And so everything was on me now. So I filled out this application that they want you to fill out. And you got to talk about everything, the case, what transpired, this, and that. And then they do their own research. And so 2% of applicants, their case actually gets looked at. Only 1% gets accepted. So if they accept your case, out of thousands, they get thousands and thousands of applications every year. When they accepted my case, I mean, you got to think about that. That's a light at a very dark end, at the dark end of a tunnel. And so they were working on my case for a couple of years. And then when Dateline aired over the years, the first Dateline show aired in, I want to say April of 2010. I was at Delano reception when that first show aired. And then it had just been aired subsequently, year after year, month after month, and so forth. And then there was a young man who caught wind of the case in 2015. He clicked on a link that showed my case, Iraq war veteran convicted of murder. And he said something compelled him to click that link. And he watched the 2-hour episode of Dateline and then spent the next 8 hours dissecting my whole case. And he was able to pull everything public record-wise and put together a synopsis of everything and took it to his dad, who was a civil attorney in the California system, and asked him if he knew of a case where an Iraq war veteran was convicted and he thought he was innocent, would he want to help? So his father, Jeff, who was a good friend of mine now, he was reluctant to take the case. For one, this is a criminal case, and he's not used to, he's not a criminal attorney. So what is this going to take to work on? Money. More importantly, that's it, money. Money and time. Do I have time, and do I have the money? And do I have resources? And so the answer that he came up with was yes. So you ask, how did I get free, or how did this move forward? Well, there was a new system or program that was instituted by Jackie Lacey at that time called the CRU, the Conviction Review Unit. And their sole purpose was to look at cases of people who felt that they were wrongfully convicted and who have maintained their innocence throughout their whole ordeal. That means taking no plea deals, just I'm innocent, I've maintained it. And then you would have to go through an application process with that also. And so my attorney, Jeff, filed a 34-page letter that laid out the case itself, facts versus what the state presented at trial. And that's how it moved forward. It caught the attention of that office, and it was moved forward from there.
So in essence, if they would have not allowed that statement that was put into or submitted, and they would have not moved forward, then you still would have pretty much just been where you were at.
Yeah, we can surmise that more than likely I'd still be. I mean, you never can tell. I mean, I don't want to think about that because it's that'd be a painful thought to even think that I'd still be in prison right now. I mean, here we are, 2025. That's 20 years of incarceration for what? So, yeah, I can't even think about that. That's crazy to me.
Yeah, man. Imagine somebody else would have been there. It would have been a whole different story. So at this point right now, you've been out, 9 years at this point?
June will be 9 years, yes.
9 years?
Yeah, June 23rd. Yeah.
Man, life would have been different.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what my life would have been like had I not been arrested. I would probably still be in the military. I don't know if I'd still be married to my ex-wife at that time. But yeah, a lot of things would have changed. A lot of things for me, when I think about my incarceration, there was a lot of pros that outweighed the cons. And I think for every individual that is serving time, that's what needs to be looked at. Everybody goes through their own thing in prison. Everybody's in there for different reasons, whether you in there banging or whether you in there like a square, whether you're, I don't know, man. It's everybody takes it differently, but how you conduct yourself inside those walls determines everything.
So, being where you came from, you're from out of state, you're from North Carolina, you come to California, you end up in the prison system. And obviously prison, it's a whole different animal. Things are normal on the outside, are not normal on the inside. There's racial segregation, there's politics. How is it like somebody like you was able to, stay strong and move forward and not get caught up in any of that mess going on behind the walls?
Yeah, I don't. I think it's difficult to explain for people on the outside looking in. The media or movies they portray something totally different about prison life or county jails or whatever the case may be. Some of it is true, but for the most part, they got it wrong. Yes, there are politics all involved in county jail. I think it's, in a sense, it's worse in county than it is in state prison, actually. But I managed to navigate my way through there just by maintaining who I am. I didn't conform to the politics because it's not something I believed in. I respected what they were doing because that's their get down, right? You can't do nothing but respect somebody for what they're doing. Even though I may not agree with it, I may not bang with it, but I respected it, right? So respect my decision. And I put myself in a very bad position by turning down the politics from the Woods or Whites or Pecker Woods, as short for Woods and so forth. I didn't bang with anybody, man. I respected everybody's get down, and hopefully, they respected mine. And I made it through 4.5 years of LA County and never ran into any type of issues with, violence in a sense towards me. And I don't know if there was things going on behind the scenes to move on me or anything else of that sort, but it never came to fruition. Nothing ever happened to me while I was in in county jail. And I don't know what to attribute that to besides maintaining who I was as a man. And no matter how strong you are, you could always be set up easily by the COs or the sheriff deputies in county jail. So, but moving forward into the penitentiary, navigating through that was a little bit more difficult because, when you hit the yard on in GP on the main line in a prison, I mean, the first thing you're doing is presenting paperwork. The shop, whoever's running that block they want your paperwork. So you submit your paperwork, they look it over, blah, 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 then they shoot you the rules and regulations. And yeah, I mean, did I conform to that? Yeah, I did conform to that. Why wouldn't I? I mean, they're not asking me to do anything crazy, right? At least at that point, but I still maintained my integrity. I was still just Ray. I wasn't Ray part of the wood pile. I was just Ray. And, I spoke to people, like I said, you just be respectful. Everybody had their spot on the yard, blacks, the others, the Indians, everybody had their space, and you knew, that unless you're walking the track, you don't go into other people's spaces. And it's just a respect thing, and it wasn't until, I'd been on the main line for about 6 years, and then it finally came down. I was at church one day, and a black dude who had the keys to the yard for the blacks came up to me at church after service and gave me a little warning that they were going to move on me because they didn't like the way that I was programming, and said that I should probably leave the yard. And of course, at that point, my chest was big, and I'm like, I'm not going no place. I'm not going to PC it up, man. I just take whatever it is they're going to give to me, But I tell you how the Lord works, right? The Lord works in mysterious ways. And shortly after that conversation with that young man, the yard went on lockdown for some odd reason, right? Not only was it a lockdown, but we were on lockdown for almost 3 weeks. No movement, no nothing, right? Just showers, that's it. 1 cell at a time, showers. And I think it was during that time, I talked to my bunkie at that time, and I told him what my plans were after this lockdown. I had time to reflect on, what was getting ready to happen, because I thought that they had slid him something to take care of, the situation. And he basically told me, I won't name any names, but, he told me, he said, Ray, don't even worry about me, man. He said, I'm a short timer. I ain't got time for this stuff. I just do what you got to do, man, and I wish you the best. And so shortly after that lockdown, I had, locked it up and went over to the PC side, or SNYs, or I don't know what they're calling them now, 50-50 yards or
non-designated,
non-designated yards and so forth. Yeah. So, the transition.
So doing that did that affect your ego or your the way you felt about yourself?
It did. It really did, because when you're in the system and you're on the main line, all you hear about is dudes talking about PCs. Like, PCs are nobody but rapists, pedophiles, people who beat up elderly people or whatever, right? Something that's just not, the business. And so here I am over here. I've been charged with murder, and yet I'm getting ready to go over here where I potentially may be in a cell with somebody who's molested some kids, and how do you handle that? Like, what am I, if I find out this dude has molested kids, like, what I'm gonna do? Am I going to go ahead and take care of that and suffer the consequences, or I won't ask? And that's what the whole thing is when you go to SNY or PC yards or non-designated yards now, is most of the time you didn't ask people what they were there for, because you generally didn't want to know the answer unless you were ready to get active on them. And that wasn't me. I just want to do my time, man. Let me do my time. Let me fight my case on the outside, and let me see if I can move forward. That's all I wanted to do. And that's what you got to do, man. For these guys that, unfortunately, they go in there and, they live that banger life. If you talk to most of them, man, at the end of the day, and the ones that are on PC, they'll tell you, man, I don't know what I was thinking. Because the same people that you were riding for and banging for, the same people that turn their back on you. And that's the sad reality of being in the politics. You could be the big dog, and then a day later you could be a big dog in the grave because the homies done moved on you for some odd reason. You know, a decision that you made or something that you said or something that was not done, and they end up taking your life, which is sad. You know, you put in all that effort and that work towards something that was, in essence, for nothing. It was just nothing. So I navigated through it, man, and I just respected everybody. Only confrontations I ever had were on the basketball court. Other than that, everything was cool.
How good were you at basketball?
I was good, man. I was good. I was good. You can, you ever find some people I was locked up with? I was always at the top of the list on somebody's yard until I remember in Centinela there was these little youngsters that came in, old Charles and Jay. Yeah, they came in, man, and they became the top dogs down there in Centinela where I was incarcerated at one of my spots. And but yeah, at Corcoran there were some good players up there, and I was always at the top of the list and so forth. So yeah, I was pretty decent, man.
And when you locked it up, what prison were you at again?
I was in Corcoran. I was on B Yard in Corcoran.
And how long were you there before you decided to take off?
Man, I would think I was there about a year. Yeah, somewhere around in a year. So you know, you imagine that, you know, a year of walking that main line as far as prison wise in a state penitentiary, it was crazy, you know. It really was. I've seen a lot happen, you know, people getting dealt with for some odd reason, you know, and I didn't understand the concepts, man. I just didn't understand the concepts. You want me to be all gung ho about being part of this group that you in, but yet you the main one that's trying to take my life, if that makes sense. Like your own people be the main ones that turn on you. You ain't got to worry about something else from you know, as what they use in prison terminology, you know, a black or Norteño or whatever, right? You got to worry about somebody from the woodpile coming to get you, and that's crazy to me. It's like what are we representing? Like why do we do this to our own people? Even for the Southsiders, you know, the Southsiders are violent, man. Them cats is violent, boy. You mess around with them, and you know they gonna clean up real quick. You know, and then they don't do it in a nice fashion. It's everything's violent. So I you know, it's just something I couldn't wrap my mind around. I respect what they do because that's the way that they grew up. That's in the, you know, the culture in which they lived. And you know, I didn't grow up in that culture, so I didn't understand the concept of the gang life. You know, but now I understand it more because I lived through it for all that time and you know, it's to each his own, brother. You know, you have to figure that stuff out as you go through life, and you know.
Would you say, as the first, as soon as you enter county jail, are you part of a gang? Do you feel like that's a true statement?
I would say yes. I mean, as soon as I got to 3600 Baker Road, and that door closed and that sheriff deputy walked off the tier, there was a dude down the way. I was in cell, I want to say I was in cell 9. Yeah, because Silent was in cell 10. But yeah, so yeah. And there was a dude down the tier, started hollering down the tier, hey, Wood, hey, Wood. And at this point, I had no idea what a Wood was. I had no idea what he was saying or who he was calling, anything. And then he finally called out my cell number and asked me what race was I. And I said, I'm just Ray, man. And I think that kind of threw him off a little bit. He was like, no, he said, are you a Wood? I was like, dog, I don't even know what a Wood is, man. He says, you a white boy? I said, well, I'm Ray, man. That's who I am, I'm Ray. And then he's like, all right, man, I'm gonna get at you on paper. I didn't know what that meant either, right? I had no idea. He said, when I shoot this line down here to you, just grab the paper off the line. I said, what line? I'm like, what are you talking about, man? You know, the prison logo and the lingo, I should say, the prison lingo is something that you had to learn fairly quickly. I learned how to sign language while I was in prison, you know, and there's a a difference between the official sign language and, what prisoners use as sign language, just a difference in letters. But I learned that by reading the almanac. The almanac had the symbols in there for for the letters. And I used to watch in 1750. We had these mirrors that were in front of our cells. They were two-way mirrors. They had a catwalk behind the mirror, which is where the sheriff deputies would do their walks. They wouldn't walk on the tier. Occasionally, every now and then, but for the most part, they walked behind that glass. And so you could watch people up and down the tier in their cells, and dudes would be, hanging out the cell when they got their sign language going. And generally, I started picking up on, very quickly their letters and how they, swipe to go for another word. And, you was able to start putting sentences and words together again. So I learned how to make spreads. I learned how to, make a grill, on my desk in prison. I learned how to make glue. I learned how to put up lines. I mean, it's amazing to me that in that system, in that world, how smart the individuals really are. Like, I don't think the average person who's never been to prison, you'll never understand how intelligent an inmate or a convict really is. And, you run across some really, really intelligent people in there. And unfortunately, they've used their intelligence for, the wrong things. And they got themselves caught up in situations that I'm sure they could go back and change if they could.
Let me ask you, this might be a crazy question, but is there anything that you miss from prison?
Absolutely. I shouldn't say that, but it's funny, right? Because I still stay in touch with about 15 dudes that I was locked up with. Some on the main line and some that are still in the non-designated yards, I guess, nowadays. But yeah, man, I miss the unity. And how do you elaborate on that for myself? The unity, love. I love playing basketball inside of prison. It was the most aggressive. I don't know, it was aggressive ball, man. It was like, that's the way ball should be played. And you were able to release, that aggression, whatever you had built up inside of you, you can take that out on somebody on the court. For one, you're better than them, right? I shouldn't say that right here. My cockiness coming out again. But yeah, I don't know, man. I miss that. I miss cooking in prison, man. I try to duplicate some of the things that I made inside of there. I can't duplicate them out here, man. I can't duplicate a doggone rice bowl. The rice bowls I made in there, man, them things was fire. But I can't duplicate them out here, man. It's just different. I'm not cooking on a desk. I used to use my hot plate, the element in there, you hook that thing up and you got a grill on your desk, man, grilled burritos, grilled, peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, grilled bologna. I mean, those are the things I miss, man. I hate to say that, but yeah, there are certain things that I miss, and those are a couple of them right there, man.
So let me ask you. So when you were finally exonerated, how did that occur? Did you go back to court? Did you just receive a letter in the mail? Did the CO let you know you were going to be released? How did that happen? Yeah.
So to go back, once my attorneys. Well, once I accepted them as my attorneys, once they got my case, and I agreed that they were going to represent me, and they filed all the necessary paperwork. One thing I never did was tell anybody what was going on with my case. That's like it should be a big no-no in prison. Most people know that you don't talk about, what's going on in your case, because there's a lot of haters in that world, and you never know who's going to hate on you. And so, did I know that I was going to be released the day that I went to court? I did not. I suspected it, and so did everybody else that saw it on the news the previous day. So, funny story, I guess. On the 22nd of June of 2016. We're in the cell, and my bunkie had the bottom bunk. He had like a lower bunk chronicle, but he jumps up off the rack and he's like, "Oh shit, bunkie! Oh shit, you on the news right now?" I'm like, "What?" He's like, "You on the news?" So I turned to the news, and lo and behold, They're talking about me coming to court tomorrow with the possibility of being released, and some other things. But I was like, oh my God, this ain't good. That was like, just because you want a PC or SNY yard, again, there's dudes that are still active, man. They just decided to go a different route, but they're still active. So you don't know who's watching this, at least this is my perspective of it, right? So I'm thinking, man, why are they showing this on the news right now? Like somebody's going to hate on this and maybe try to, start something. And so we hadn't been to chow that night. And so my door cracks as well as everybody else. I'm in Chino State Prison at this time. I'm in Chino. And we get out on the tier and everybody's like, Ray, so people watching the news, man, most people watch the news in prison, right? That's just a common thing that we do. And, people wanted me to come to yard that night. And I was like, yeah, I see you out there, right? I come out there, but of course, I did not go to yard. And yeah, you could call it a fear thing, because why would I want to go and put myself in a line of fire just because nothing's ever happened to me, at that particular point, as far as, being beat up or jumped, or that don't mean it ain't going to happen tonight. Somebody might have saw this and be like, well, I'm gonna get Ray before he goes or whatever, right? So no, I stayed in the cell. But so the next day on the 23rd, when they popped my door at about 5:45 in the morning, I grabbed my little bin, my tote that I had, and it had just my personal property in it. I had already given everything away to my bunkie. I said, here, man, just whatever you want, this is yours, but this is my personal stuff. You can do whatever you want to do with everything else, TVs, the CL20s or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And I made it over to R&R and got into it with the CO that was working there this morning. He was, I don't know, he was being an ass, man. I don't know if he woke up on the wrong side of the bed or what, but again, I've always been, cordial and polite with these dudes. I never try to disrespect them. They in there doing their job, and some of them are, let's just call it assholes at what they do. And but most of them are not. They're respectful. They know the game too. But I couldn't figure out what this dude's problem was that morning. But we had a couple of words, and he threw me against the wall and took my personal property and put it someplace and threw me in one of these little cages back there and told me I'd just have to wait back here until somebody picks me up. So I had no idea who was picking me up from Chino State Prison, but needless to say, I was extremely nervous. I was nervous, anxious, because I didn't know what was happening. I had no idea what was going to go on or anything else, right? So the two sheriff deputy, oh no, they weren't deputies, they were actually the detectives. Two of the new detectives that they had assigned to my case actually picked me up from Chino State Prison and drove me to CCB, back to CCB, where I went in front of a judge. And initially, after it was all said and done, everybody had their say so. The judge made his ruling and agreed that, I should be released. However, he wanted to send me back to Chino State Prison to be released, because I'm no longer I'm a ward of the state. I don't belong to county no more. I belong to the state. So in essence, the county really has no say so in what they do with state property, if that makes sense. And so I made it very clear to my attorney that, man, you can't send me back to Chino State Prison, man. If you send me back to prison, something's going to happen. It's on the news. Something's going to happen. Either the COs are going to set me up because they know. This was my thinking. I was just pleading that that they wouldn't send me back to state prison. But in essence, I understood it was out of their hands. My state number is AD0123. I'm no longer 8849215. And so that's what I had to realize. So as I paced, they put me downstairs in this holding tank, and I'm pacing back and forth, man, pacing back and forth. And I think after about an hour and some change, the outer door cracks open, and I see this female bailiff standing there, and she has what appears to be my clothes from what I brought from prison. I had a pair of...
Your dress outs?
I guess, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't even call them dress out. It was just a pair of Pro Club shorts and Pro Club T-shirt and my Adidas shoes. And that's what she says. She says, well, Mr. Jennings, it looks like you're going to be released from here. And so when you look at this from a historical standpoint, my case with the CRU was I was the first person that was exonerated by the CRU. It made a massive amount of news in LA, and of course the state of California. I was on the front page of the LA Times Friday, Saturday, and Sunday of that same week, and then I was the first person. Unless they told me a fib, they told me I was the first person to ever be released from LA County from state prison. So behind the scenes, the judge understood the severity of everything, and he actually cleared his calendar for the rest of the day. And from what I was told, he made all the necessary phone calls and did all the necessary paperwork and pushed it to Sacramento, and Sacramento in turn agreed to allow me to be released from county jail.
Let me ask you something. So compared to the feeling that you had when you got found guilty to when you're about to get released, can you compare the feelings? Yeah,
they're night and day. Night and day, man. I mean, when I was found guilty, when they read that guilty verdict to me, my whole world was crushed. You can't explain it any further than that. Like you cannot explain that type of feeling, to understand the helplessness that you just suffered through and that you're going to suffer through. There's absolutely nothing in your power that you can do to stop what's just getting ready, or what's happening, or what's getting ready to happen. And so you fast forward to, from 2009 when I was, found guilty to, 2016. Now they're getting ready to release me. And so I was given the choice by the judge and the sheriff deputies that were going to escort me. How did I want to go? How? Do you want to go underground, which is where they brought us in at CCB? They bring you in underground. Or do you want to go out the front door? So, man, I'm going out the front door, man. And so what was my feeling? Oh, man, bubble guts, butterflies. My legs were real. I'm hoping I hit it pretty well. I don't know if I did or didn't. I've watched it on the news media numerous of times, and I was like, yeah, I know what I was thinking at that particular moment. But I was scared, man, nervous, anxious. I felt sick to my stomach, because I'm like, is this real? Is this the dream? Because that part was a dream. Is this part of the dream? Are they going to wait till I get right outside and then decide to arrest me again for something else? That's what I thought. That's like, is this really over? But no, are they going to arrest me? Are they going to come up with something else to throw me back into prison? Scared to death, man. And it wasn't until my attorney pulled up in his car and I got in that front seat and sat down, man. I'm shaking now just thinking about it, because I remember that feeling, man. I couldn't stop shaking. I was literally shaking really bad. And I don't know, man. I was just shaking.
And prior to that, did any of the sheriffs or anybody that works within the system congratulate you, hey, and you were going to get out, or any type of feedback like that?
Yeah. So I won't mention any names. Again, I know the names of all the sheriff deputies that came and talked to me prior to me leaving for state prison, and afterwards. But yeah, a lot of guys that were present in the court during my first two trials down there in CCB, they actually came to the courtroom because they had caught wind that I was back, and they actually came in and talked to me before I walked out that front door, and they were pretty happy with the outcome. It was
So you lost 10 years or 11 years of your freedom. That's time that's gone. Yeah. You can't reverse the time in hands, and sorries, I don't think are going to cut it. Did the state compensate you for the time that you lost?
Yeah, that's like one of the main questions people like to ask, and I think people miss the point when it comes to that. It doesn't matter how much, if anything, I was compensated. Again, you just hit the nail on the head. I lost 11 years of my life, but it's just not me. You have to understand, I had 5 small children at the time of my arrest. My youngest daughter was 5 months old. Think about that. My youngest daughter was 5. Yeah, man. And then you think about that, right? 5 months old, and then when I'm out, I'm celebrating her 11th birthday. So who cares about compensation at that point? I didn't. I could care less. There ain't a certain amount of money that you could give anybody. Well, I'm not going to say that. Let me retract that, because everybody's different, right? Maybe some people be like, fine, I'll do 11 years if you give me a few $1,000,000 and then so forth. But if you out there living a good life and you got a family to take care of and kids, none of that matters, man. Like, I can't get that back. This event has it was a positive. It was a positive thing for me in so many ways, but yet it greatly affected my children growing up. They didn't have their father in their lives. And for those that think that that's something that's minor, like, it's not. I mean, if you're a father, man. You think about kids that grow up without fathers. And most of the people that I encountered in prison, they ain't had fathers. You know who they had? They had uncles. And their uncles was part of what? They was part of the gangs. That's their role models. That's who they had to look up to their big homies. That's all they had, because they didn't have that male structure in their life. So my kids suffered the most. My mama suffered. And people think, how much did they compensate you for? It don't matter. None of that matters. If I could get my 11 years back, I tell it, whatever money that they gave me, I give it all back to them tenfold if I could. Now, you keep your money. Give me my life back. But yet you have to look at it from a different perspective on that, right? Because when we go through life and we go through trials and tribulations, there's a reason for it. And a lot of people miss that because they're so busy focused on the situation at hand. They can't see what's going on in the future. It's very difficult to do. It's very difficult to understand that you're going through something in your life right now for a reason. What is that reason? When you get sentenced to prison, or let's say you involved in some crimes and then you get busted somehow, right? And you get a slap on the wrist, you get a couple of years, and not to say that a couple of years ain't a lot, because any time away from your family and any time that you locked up behind them walls, it's a lot, right? But what did I learn? What am I trying to learn in this? Like, are you trying to learn anything? Because some dudes don't. They get in there and act a fool. You get homies that come in there, and if you know anybody, I talked to dudes that came in with, they had like 2 years. And now they got 2 consecutive life sentences for what? Because the big homie over here done slid something to you and told you, hey, you need to move on this dude. And you go over there and move on somebody, and this dude dies. I mean, think about that, man. So for me, it was my kids, man. The compensation, yeah, did I get compensated? Absolutely, right? But that ain't nothing compared to what I would have liked to have done with my children for them 11 years. So was it worth it? Nah, it ain't worth it, man. I can give it all back, But would I be the man that I am today had I not been through that situation? Probably not. But I'm a far greater man by going through what I went through and, turned out the way that I am. People ask me, how come I'm not bitter? How come I'm not angry? Why? Why should we be that way? Why I want to hold on to all that right there that's going to kill me in the inside? That's going to make me hate you. It's going to make me hate him. It's going to make me hate everybody in this world, including the doggone police, the COs, the cops, the attorneys, the judges, the parents. Everybody that had something negative to say against me, and everybody that had, a hand in my demise, including myself. If I'm gonna hate them, I might as well hate myself because I was my number one enemy. So why should I hold on to any of this stuff, man? I let all that crap go. That's why I can walk around my communities and nobody can look at me and say, you've been to prison. There ain't nobody that I've ever met, once I tell them my story, they'd be like, man, we can't, you was in prison? Yeah, I was in prison, yeah. In California, in some of the most violent prisons that they are. Been around riots. I've been around dudes who got sliced up, cut up, stabbed up. I got dudes who got knocked out. I've been around it all, right? And yet, man, I'm just Ray, man. Everybody that knows me, I'm just Ray. Ain't too much changed about me except for I'm no longer that egotistic, immature young man. I'm now a 50-year-old man that's out here just living life, man, and traveling the world and, trying to reintegrate myself to my kids still, even though it's almost been 9 years. The damage was done, brother. You know what I'm saying? The damage is done. You can't get that back. So trying to reintegrate yourself into your family after being gone for that long, that's no easy task, brother. And that's for any of those guys that are listening who may hear this in the inside, you know that. I got dudes that are getting out, man, who have kids. And I'm trying to set them up to where they understand that when you went in, your kids were babies. They're not babies no more. So what you have in your head is not what's going to be when you get out. Like you have to be prepared that they may not accept you for who you are. You accept, this are your kids, but yet they may not accept you. And how you going to handle that? You going to be angry with them? You going to be mad with them? I had to realize that with my own kids, man. It's like they were this big and now they almost grown people. And I'm thinking of them as still being here. I'm thinking that they're going to run up to me and be like, daddy, daddy, daddy. I ain't getting none of that. Get none of that, man. I'm a stranger to them. They don't know me.
In your experience, can a father or a dad raise their children from behind bars?
It's a yes or no answer. Yes. If you have a strong mother that's involved, and I mean the mother of your children is what I mean by that. If you have a strong mother who is an open door for you to have communication with your children, to correspond with your children, and now they have these tablets, these iPads or tablets that they can use to do video calls on a regular. Like you do it from your. It's crazy, right? So yes, can you be a parent? But the effect of being there in person is what they're missing. There's nothing like the presence of a father in the household. And whether you're not in that household, you're separated or whatever the case may be, but there's still nothing like the presence of a father in a child's life. For any dude or anybody, whether you're in prison or outside here in the world, man, there's nothing like it. So yes, you can father from inside the walls, but it's very limited because they don't hear and they don't see daddy's presence. They don't hear your voice inflections. When daddy speaks, most of the time things get done, right?
Yeah.
That's just how it is. They don't have that unless they have another strong male role model that is, in a sense, stepping in where you lack off at. And then for you as a male inside of that world, you have to be able to accept that there's another dude that's filling that role for you. You can't hate on that brother, right? Why would you hate on the man that's trying to, help you with the family? He with your girl, your hyena or whatever, right? You can't hate on that brother.
Yeah.
It is what it is, man. You locked up. So it's limited. So it's a yes and no, answer to that question. It can be done. And no, it can't be done. It's a yes or no. You just have to look at it from different perspectives.
Let me ask you, what would be the soundtrack to your life?
Man. Wow. Out of all the years, man, no one's ever asked me that. You might have to ask me that at a later time, brother.
Let me ask you this.
That's a great question. I need to answer that, man. Hold on, brother.
Okay.
That's a good question.
Maybe this one you can answer. When you were on your way to reception from LA County Jail, when you were going to go hit your first prison,
Mm-hmm.
what song was playing in the radio while you're driving to prison?
Highway to Hell. If I remember correctly, it was Highway to Hell, man. Yeah. And I don't even know if it was done by the, because when you're on those buses, man, those dudes that pick you up, them transport cops, man, them jokers don't play.
Yeah.
They don't play. You ain't doing no talking. There ain't no funny business going on. It's this real shit right now, And that song, I mean, it was Highway to Hell. I don't know if they just did that intentionally or what, but it wasn't playing loud, but it was there. Highway to Hell.
And let me ask you, so if anybody's seeing you right now that recognize you, whether they were in the system, your cellie or staff or whoever, what would you want them to know, about you, where you're currently at in life right now?
Man, let me tell you something that's crazy, right? That's happened to me, right? So last year, I bought for my son, not this Christmas, but the previous Christmas, I should say. I bought Sacramento King tickets for my son to go to the game up there to see the Sacramento Kings play the Denver Nuggets. And then my wife was like, you know what? Why don't you go out there with them and go to the game with them as his Christmas gift, right? I'm like, well, I didn't even think about that. So yeah, let me do that. So booked the flight, went out there, just me and my son. Man, we get up into downtown San Francisco. So now we're headed to Sacramento, right? But I said, let's go by San Francisco. We'll stop in there. Let's go find some jerseys for the home team, right? Man, so we're at a Target downtown San Francisco, a Target. And my son heard it. I did not hear it, but he heard somebody calling my name in Target. Like, Ray. And then finally my son, he turned around, he was looking and when I saw him staring, so I turned around real quick because I'm like, what? Yeah, I'm like, what's going on? So I turned around and there's this dude standing right there looking at me. Josh Brown is his name. And I just grabbed him and hugged him. Man, it was like instantaneous. I knew who this cat was. But I said, what? I didn't know what to think. I'm like, what the hell, man? I thought you had life. I didn't know what to say. I was so, think about this, brother. I'm living out here in North Carolina. I go to San Francisco. In your downtown in San Francisco, there is millions of people. How is it that this dude bumps into me and sees me at a Target? And I'm like, dude, oh my God. He's like, man, Ray, he said, I couldn't believe when you walked by me. He said, was that Ray? I said, no, that ain't Ray. So this dude had just got out. They had just found him suitable for parole, right? So he's been down for many years and they let him out. So he's at a transitional home in San Francisco. So anyhow, we get to talking, right? And he's like, man, so what's been going on with your life? Like, what's happening with you? This, and that. And yeah, we just caught up right there in the middle of a damn Target, man. That is like absolutely wild to me to think about. Out of millions of people in the world, I run into somebody that I was locked up with in Centinela State Prison. Somebody I played basketball with at Centinela State Prison. So yeah, so what there's a great scenario right there for you.
And you said you did some world traveling. Would you mind sharing some of the places you've been to?
Man, where have I not been to is the question. So even before my incarceration, I was always traveling about different places. I lived in Germany for 3 years. I have most of my family lives in Italy. We are Italian. I've been to Italy on numerous occasions. I've been to just about every island in the Caribbean that you can think of. St. Martin, Jamaica, the Bahamas, St. Lucia, Antigua. Man.
Have you been to Puerto Rico?
I've been to Puerto Rico. I've been to, London. I've just been around the world, man.
Yeah.
That's what it's about, right? This is what I be trying to get the dudes that I still stay in touch with. Don't let somebody take away what is possibly yours. Now, it's a little bit more difficult when you're a convicted convict. It's very difficult if if at all, of getting a passport. You know, generally, if you've been convicted, you can't get a passport. You know,
Yeah.
but I think if certain, you know, if you can work the system a little bit, you know, you don't need a passport when you travel on a cruise. A lot of guys don't know this. You don't need a passport. Does it help to have one? Sure, because if you get stuck in one of these countries, you end up getting off the cruise ship on and you get stuck somehow, you need a passport to get back into the U.S. if you get left somehow. But all you need is a birth certificate, man. And you go get on a cruise and, man, you can cruise to all the islands. You can cruise to the Mediterranean, right? Because you're on a cruise. So you don't need a passport to cruise, man. Just get on this cruise. You don't need a passport to go to Puerto Rico. People don't realize Puerto Rico is the United States.
Your ID, that's it.
You know?
Yeah.
You get yourself out of the country. And that's, so like the guys that I stay in touch with, man, they're so appreciative of, you know, first of all, I've maintained my word. If I told you I'm going to stay in touch with you, I'm going to stay in touch with you. And I send packages to dudes. I just ordered a package yesterday for a buddy of mine that's up in San Quentin. You know, I send money to their books. You know, I send pictures, I send videos of my travels and just different everyday life that we always, you know, that's what you're starving for when you locked up, man. I want to know what's going on the outside, because this is all I see. In the inside is this dumb, ignorant stuff that I'm wrapped around. And I hate to say it like that, but that's just the way it is. You know, it's when you look at it from the bigger point of view, it's just crazy, man. It's pure chaos. And so sometimes you want a little bit of, you know, peace and serenity and having the contact with somebody that's been in your position. I understand when somebody tells me that they frustrated. I understand that, you know, somebody tell me they over it, you know, or whatever the case may be. I just had another good friend of mine. He just got released from prison, and he had been down for 15 years straight, and he's back out here in North Carolina. He just came to the house a couple of weekends ago, as a matter of fact.
Wow.
Yeah. And I've known him for, you know, since 2010.
Yeah.
You know, and they call him Carolina. And yeah, he's out, and, you know, he's doing good. You know, the sad reality of you know, people who get out, dudes that I know. I've had 5 of my bunkies be released from prison, and unfortunately, 4 of them are back in, and one of them I have no idea. I think he's probably 6 feet under right now. But yeah, 4 of them I went back in. You know, and it's very difficult when you're not exposed to what we have out here in the world, especially if your vice is drugs, or your vice is women, or whatever your vice is, right? And then you end up going back to that same old stuff that got you into prison. And so it's sad that these guys, one guy had been down, he did like almost 26 years straight. They found him suitable for parole. He was out for a couple of years and then got mixed up with the wrong stuff. And next thing you know, he's back in prison right now. And it hurts my heart, man. It really does, because I want to see everybody succeed. I want to see all these guys that I know, you know, get out and hit the ground running. And it's not easy, but I keep telling these dudes, man, I'm here for you. I may not be able to, you know, help you, you know, the way that you would like to be helped, but man, I mean, I'll send you money if you need it, dog. Just don't do nothing stupid, man. Just call me, you know. I'll help you out as much as I can. And that's what I like to do. I like to give back, man. I like to help dudes that are in a, you know, a more difficult situation than I was.
Man, well, Ray, hey, man, I thank you. I appreciate you allowing us to use your garage right here.
Yeah,
and
man.
you know, taking the time out of your day, you know, to share a piece of your journey, because obviously in an hour and 20 or 30 minutes, we can't cover the whole 11 years and everything you went through. But I appreciate you, you know, you taking time out of your day and sharing your journey and opening up to us.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. I love what you're doing. Anything I can do else to help support your work, brother, just reach out, give me a call, man. If I got to come out there to Vegas, I come out there to Vegas. It don't matter.
No, I'm definitely, or even we could do video. Normally, I like to do live in person because I think video is cheating.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I'm like you, man. I like to do it in person, brother.
Yeah.
It's more personal.
Yeah.
You know, you get a sense. Can't get a sense when you're sitting behind another camera and you sitting behind a camera, dog. I like, you know.
That face to face, yeah.
It's a lot more impactful that way.
Yeah, if you were in prison, it would be different. But we are on the free world, and you know, like I tell my wife, anywhere I could get, you know, I could visit somebody, whether it's a plane, train, or boat or whatever. Then you know, I'm willing to do that.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
I appreciate it, man. I wish you the best, brother.
And any parting words for anybody, you know, out there listening to this interview?
I mean, yeah, parting words, man. Keep the faith. You know, a lot of guys won't tell you that they have faith. Because you know you have to be hard in prison. You know you can't be soft. You got to be hard.
Yeah.
But behind them closed doors, when you're in that cell by yourself, you know, maintain your faith, man. You know, and just stay strong. Be true to yourself. Be true to those around you, and man, just you know, love yourself and love God, and man, life will be all right, brother. You know.
I got one for you. One last one. I'm not going to ask you if you could have done it differently. What would you have done, you know, in those interviews? Because you can't go back in time, so it doesn't matter. But what advice can you give somebody that finds himself being in a similar situation that you were in, for them not to end up in prison?
Yeah, I think the key is don't talk. Simple. That's about the only advice I can give you. Until you have some type of representation that's sitting beside you, you know, tell the cops in a respectful way, or whoever it is that you're speaking to, you know, respectfully, I'm gonna go ahead and be quiet until I get somebody that, you know, that represents me. And that's like the biggest number one thing when you're dealing with a situation, whether it be a murder or anything that has to do with somebody questioning you from the law enforcement agency. Don't do it by yourself. Don't think you got it figured out, because these guys know every trick in the book. They know how to trip you up. There's been many times that guys have, you know, confessed to things that they probably hadn't done, just because they felt the pressure of, you know, of that. So yeah, just that'd be the only advice I could give somebody is, man, don't talk. Don't be like me. Don't be an idiot like me. Don't be egotistic like me. Don't be cocky like me. You know, don't think you got to be hard in front of a cop. Just tell that joker, you know, hey, I'm not going to say anything until I get some representation. There ain't nothing they can do to you after that, man. I mean, yeah, they can make life a little bit harder for you, you know, within the situation, but that'd be it, man. Just don't talk.
All right, Ray. Well, like I say around here, life's like a candle. Once you blow it out, it's lights out. Yes, and sir. With that, we're out of here. Thank you.
Man. Thank you, brother.